This is Visions Under Construction. A chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. For their continued support, we'd like to thank Simwood.com, who can turn you as a developer into a telco. Why not make CloudOnyx your communication partner? Go to cloudonyx.io. You can find everything about the VUC at VUC.me, thanks to Bluehost, and thanks also to ZipDX.com, the conference bridge, and to Voxbone.com for local rate dial-ins. And if you want to know more about those dial-ins, you go to VUC.me/Voxbone, and you will see local rate dial-ins. You can't find out everything about the VUC at VUC.me, but you might find out a lot more if you go to Camellia World, May 6th to 8th in Berlin. We'd love to see you there. So with that, a bunch of switching that doesn't need to be commented, but I have to think aloud. And we suddenly come to a camera of me. You can see my brother was replaced by a hat. We have with us today, what happened to, we lost a couple of people. We've got, since Andy isn't there, we'll start with Michael Graves. Michael's been here the longest. Hey, Michael? Houston.
Well, not this morning, but generally, okay.
Michael, what's the temperature in Houston?
That's a good question. It's probably about 50 degrees here. It's a bit gloomy, and we're having a windstorm this afternoon. But on the whole, it's pretty seasonal for us.
You know that I didn't know that Houston was on the, whatever you call it, the Gulf? I did not know it was a port even.
Oh, no, one of the biggest ports in the country.
I learned 70%, that on the blacklist.
70% of the coffee that comes into the U.S. comes through the port of Houston, which is...
% of the cocaine? No, never mind. Probably doesn't come in there anyway. No, I did not think of that because Texas is a big state. I've been there. I spent 6 months there in the USAF. Jay Carpenter's with us from Phoenix, AZ. Hey, Jay.
Hello, Randy. Hello, all.
What have you been up to this week, Jay?
Ooh, mischief, as usual. I spoke at a cybersecurity conference on Thursday, talking about blockchain and cybersecurity and so forth. And I'm doing my build a blockchain out of newspapers next week for the Arizona Commerce Authority. So
that sounds interesting.
That's what's up.
Cool. You know, it's funny because I was in Phoenix for Astracon, I don't know how many years ago. You probably were not connected at all with that kind of world in those days, I guess. Or were you?
Well, I had a conflict in my schedule, so I actually stopped in impromptu on the very last day and saw Mark Spencer, I think it was. I spoke with him. So.
And I'm pretty sure Randall Schwartz was there because I think he used to work in, if I'm not mistaken, that was the year that I met him there. And he was a guest at Astracon. That was pretty cool. Well, we've got Mr. Corrado Mela with us. Corrado, say hello.
Hello. Good evening.
What have you been up to this week besides destroying all your OSs and hardware?
No, it's too much. I don't want to bother everyone. I've been probably driving almost 1,000 miles around Scotland, so extremely busy. Too many things.
Miles around Scotland. Scotland's only about 10 miles long.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And before Christmas, everyone wants everything done before Christmas. So as always, everything ends on Hogmanay.
Okay, well, we also have Mr. Andy Smith who's with us. He doesn't want to show his face because he's wanted in several counties, but Andy is going to check the live.vuc.me, and he is also going to maybe take a couple of notes, just a word or two, so I can remember what to put in what we laughingly call the show notes, which are almost none. But anyway, a couple of interesting topics. I have to run very early today, which is probably better for everybody. So I'll talk a lot now, as always. We want to talk about Wi-Fi, but right before, Corrado and I had a big argument, violent argument, where we almost got guns and shot each other about justification. And Michael chimed in. And so I'd like to go over that really quickly because I'm inspired by another podcast that I listened to. I've forgotten the name of it already, but they just go all over the place. And so why not talk about some of the stuff that we talked about right before? Justification. Corrado, you claim, you claim that justified text is easier to read. I don't agree, and Michael has references on that. So, what do you say yourself?
Right. I have the fortune or misfortune, if you want, to have a child with a mild degree of autism and another one with ADD. So I had to read and learn a lot about what is best visually for people with impaired perception and impaired vision and so on. So accessibility, and that is important. The size of fonts, the type of fonts, and what is visible on a glimpse. A justified text is uniform and it doesn't hit some notes. Like some people with autism have a problem with textures in what you put in your mouth, what you eat, or even what you wear. It's difficult.
That's interesting. That part I didn't know, that aspect, that angle that you're coming from. I think in the usability standpoint, personally, the problem I have, and I think Michael echoed this earlier, is that first of all, browsers often make they render differently. But my problem is that depending on the user's text size and so on, what happens is that there can be like really big spaces in some of the lines. And to me, that's much more distracting than the right side being of different lengths. So my comment to you, I'm repeating you already heard what I said, but what I was saying earlier was that if you're doing graphics with the image, in other words, you're making an image, you're making text into an image. When I can control it perfectly, then I'm happy to justify. It makes sense because then I can kern it, and it looks right to me. But to have some random idea of some browser, and by the way, we don't know what browser people are using. So even though we've tested it with the three main ones, somebody's using Vivaldi and that doesn't work. I don't know. So anyway, yeah. Oh my God, we have it. Before we interrupt, let me just get over to Michael and get his comments. And we'll go back to Mr. Bodie, who we haven't seen in I don't know how long. Michael.
Yeah, good evening.
Good day, James. Michael,
with respect to justification, having spent a couple of decades in broadcast graphics, putting font on screen, and also having written for a magazine and edited for a magazine for a couple of years, and my wife is director of communications for civic government agency. We kind of can go both ways on it, but context is important. If you're reading a newspaper and the columns are narrow, then full justified, flush left and right is more readable. However, as the lines get longer, it becomes less and less valuable. And the problem is you get rivers, which are white runs of text through right runs of space through the blocks as you have to align the words to fit the full justification. And my wife is saying in laying out an annual report or something like that, the only way she'll do full justified is if she can hand kern and lead everything manually to make it perfect. Which all of that flies in the face of browser rendering, where it's going to be rendered however it's going to be rendered. And
remember that depends also on user settings. So and
it also depends upon size, platform and browser, and it's going to be rendered different on Android and different on iOS, and the font's going to be substituted, and insofar as this started as a discussion about, oh my God, what have they done to WordPress? I think that getting rid of full justified is not the capital sin that people seem to think.
No, on the other hand, it's not. Yeah, on the other hand, it's taking away a functionality that some expert user can use, and I still use it, just going into the raw HTML and adding the justified.
Yeah.
There are a number of other inline or style CSS attributes you can create to decide if you want how much kerning and how much space between the words you can accept. before.
Yeah. And if you look at, if you go back and look at, and I'm not saying it's worth it because it's not, but Matt Mullenweg's presentation when he rolled out WordPress 5 and the discussion of the new editor, the Gutenberg editor, and the blocks-based thing, I think that what's going to happen is kind of like what's happened with WordPress in the past, is somebody's going to roll out an editor that drops in and that has the features that people want, and so the extensibility is there because the blocks are available in that regard. And they're making it easier for people to do extensions to WordPress in this block construct by sort of giving away sample frameworks and stuff. So I think ultimately this will be solved and fairly quickly. On the other hand, the transition from 4.9 to 5 is going to be earth-shaking. And I think the way I described it in Wire is kind of apropos, in that there was an ecosystem that arose around WordPress, filling in the deficiencies in functionality through extensions and themes and plugins and all that kind of stuff. And when you take and put those things that were most commonplace there into the core app, you're just eating your young.
Yeah, that's not optimal for sure. Anybody else have any? I'm going to move on to the subject because I'm so limited. I got to run. But anybody else want to continue with the font and all of that thing before we move on? So, because we're going to talk about Wi-Fi, and Mr. Bodie will have his word too. Corrado,
Yeah.
are you satisfied with the end of the discussion?
No, yeah, I'm satisfied. We also need to remember that there are styles that you can apply. Besides that, for every single platform, a style for a phone, a style for a printer, a style for a browser on a computer. So just using properly CSS styles, you can get around the problems.
Yeah, but except that 2 points. One is that even CNS is not rendered exactly the same everywhere. And second of all, as I was going to quote Julia Child, or Childs, whichever it is, when she said that life is too short to stuff mushrooms. And that's also, life is too short to really, really mess around too much with CSS unless you have a really, really good reason. And frankly, let me give a high five, give me a high five on this one. How many blogs really merit that much detailed work? You know what I mean? They're going to be dead tomorrow anyway. All right, anyway. Next.
On the other hand, bloggers are the type of obsessive compulsives generally that if someone's going to do it, they're going to do it.
Oh, for sure. And they also are going to complain about it. But you need to ask, and Corrado, I told you this, you really need to ask the users. I'm really tired. We used to make sites and the customer would get information from his family and they would say, well, you need this, you need that. And then they would come up with this idea for the website that had nothing to do with what the user would want. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on about that. So let me share this screen, this application window with you, because we're going to talk about Wi-Fi. And there was a thing I posted. Someone said that 90% of the people in the UK are dissatisfied with their broadband, or was that the US? I don't know, someplace. And Corrado said, yeah, it's not the Wi-Fi, it's not the broadband, it's the Wi-Fi that sucks. So that's part of our topic. I'm going to show you mine if you'll show me yours. You don't have to. This is the Ethernet connection to my router, which, by the way, is a little low today. It should be 920. On the other hand, the upwards is a little low. It's a little high. But anyway, that is the connected. But here is the Wi-Fi. 58/29.7. Now, in all fairness, you're happy to have that. I mean, you could do 8K, 4K anyway. I don't know, 8K, Michael? I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, easy.
I mean, in a video. So, I mean, there's no problem with that. These kinds of bandwidth readings are fine if you have a family and one person downloading porn and in the other room they're gaming and then you're looking at, trying to get the latest version of some app or something. Point is, anyway, there's a huge difference here. In fact, that difference was the factor of over 10. We look at those two. And my phone did very well. I was surprised about that, actually. But the point is, you're never going to get, and we've talked about when we have guests, we go, don't try to do this on Wi-Fi. And the reason is because a lot of times their Wi-Fi, if they're on DSL, their Wi-Fi is going to be just below what's needed to do video conferencing. Anyway, Corrado, I'm going to turn this over to you because this is kind of what we were talking about. You were the one who chimed in about the Wi-Fi, and then there's a lot of challenges. One of them is what's the activity on the channel and so on. What do you have to say about that?
Not only that, it's the people perception of their broadband. It's what they have on their smartphone. So they are conflating everything that is coming from the wires coming in, the router, the Wi-Fi, and then the performances of the phone. The end result that they see is what happens on their phone. If their phone is crappy, if the Wi-Fi is crappy, if they're in the wrong room, if there's another crappy device connected to the Wi-Fi and the router is not multiple input, multiple output, it's going to slow down to let the slower device to keep up. There are so many factors that affect the performances of your Wi-Fi, but people keep complaining with the ISPs that their broadband is low. What happens on their phones is low, but it's difficult to explain all these stages, separate stages before something happens on your screen to the end user. The ISP can do as much as it could up to the router. From the router, from the aerial on the router upwards, it's up to you, I'm afraid. We can help, we can guide you, we can explain, but if you are in the kitchen and the router is in the loft and they are at the opposite side of the house, you cannot possibly think that you can get super fast connectivity to your phone. But people think that magically the fairy dust is connecting everything, and it should be working like that. It's technically difficult to explain. That's the problem.
There are apps to help you. I know this is not going to be super visible, but you can get the idea that there's a thing called Wi-Fi Analyzer. There are probably 20.
I think I recommended that to you.
Yeah. You know what? I uninstalled it ages ago, but then here it is right here. Anyway, this is something that will help you see the various signal strengths, obviously. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, first of all, Randy, thanks for showing those graphics because I wasn't aware of the disparity between your broadband connectivity and the Wi-Fi connection. But as we're talking about this, there's an interesting application that's coming to my mind, which is just recently available via the new Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, which now has power over Ethernet. So what I'm thinking, yeah, what I'm thinking, and what I'm going to try after this conversation is hooking up a Raspberry Pi to a camera and using the Ethernet connectivity directly to the router to be like a, installed teleconferencing station, and then get off of this, my Wi-Fi connected MacBook Pro and give that a try and see if the connectivity is better, because I've been using Wi-Fi and I noticed that my video conferencing is really bad. So that's what's coming out of the conversation for me.
That's a very good point, because you look and sound much better now than you did at some point in time. So maybe that's a lot. You're on a direct connection now?
No, I'm in a different location. I'm actually at a university doing this session. I had a meeting here this morning, but
so they have better.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's better, I'm sure. So.
I was wondering, just real quick, how many people, because everybody on this call probably, when you can, you're on Ethernet, right? I'm positive. My desktop, I mean, why would I not be on it? Because I have it here, and I have a switch and all of that. But I'm guessing that a lot of people, they get DSL or cable or fiber. They got the box at home. Yeah, there's typically four Ethernet channels on it, but everything's probably Wi-Fi, everything. So that,
yeah, including smart TVs and radios and internet radios and things.
There are things, if it's got an RJ, if it's got a cat proper RJ on it in our house, it's on a wire. And things like, the Nest thermostat and stuff like that, particularly, TVs and such like that. Laptops are mobile and phones are mobile and all. But even Raspberry Pis and things, if they can be put on a wire, and if I use them for media playing, they're on a wire.
Yeah, our TV upstairs, we don't have a smart TV, but the point is I do have a box, an Android TV type box upstairs. And that box, there's no way I would be able to see it with Wi-Fi. So it's got it's actually got one of those CPR, whatever the power line internet thing, which gets at least 20 megs. And so that works beautifully. James, where have you been? Tell us about it. Where you been all year?
Busy. Doing.
Your audio's a little low. Can you
But
up your audio?
Can I shout? Yeah, is that better?
Closer, closer.
Yeah, yeah. I've been a little bit on the busy side. The reason that everybody uses Wi-Fi is a challenge of actually getting the wires around the house. And if you live in a 450-year-old house like I do, that's a bit of a challenge. The new kitchen that we built where the barn used to be has just over a quarter of a mile of structured cabling in the kitchen alone. That's because we thought about it when we built it. But the rest of the house, because it's very old and the walls are that thick, it has to be Wi-Fi.
Sorry, James. It's probably worse with Wi-Fi when walls are thick, and especially if they're in some kind of stone that might have metallic content inside, because it's practically a Faraday cage. So you need to have a Wi-Fi in every room, a Wi-Fi point in every room.
Well, not quite every room, but yeah, we have a mixture of cable going around the house to plug into multiple wireless access points around the house, and then overlaid on top of that, we have power over Wi-Fi.
Power over yeah.
Ethernet over power.
Yeah, power line.
Ethernet over power line in your circumstance has to be a godsend.
Yes.
Just an observation, James. Don't you have a thatched roof?
Yes, we do.
And you have access to that roof from the rooms. So you could run the cables up in the roof space and drop them.
We did when we were rethatching the house, but that's why we now have on our chimney both a Microtik OmniTick, which is a 5 gig point to multi-point link equipment, and a 4G cell. So yeah, we're pretty well connected around here. We've got lots of Wi-Fi, lots of cable, lots of everything really. But something else, going back to James' comments, one thing I will say is that all Wi-Fi is not equal. So the performance of the Wi-Fi will vary quite dramatically depending on what waveforms you're running. And again, it's a case of picking the right waveform for the task that you want to do. So for the OmniTick, the Microtik point to multi-point stuff, we're running a 500 megabit per second capable waveform because we're really interested in very fast throughput. And then you've got things like this, which is a 1 gig link equipment, Microtik wireless wire. These things are absolutely incredibly, well, what can I say? It gives you a gigabit per second throughput. Over a range of up to, well, this one's about half a kilometer, with active beamforming, and the total package cost of that is $169. Incredible.
So James, question. On the waveform, is that tunable via a off-the-shelf router, or do you have to get a specialized type of router in order to use a particular waveform?
Again, it really depends on the equipment that you go for. So I'm now a converted fan of the Latvian Microtik stuff because they have a very, very wide kind of frequency operating range designed to operate in lots of different territories. Each.
Oh,
that's my dear darling wife calling me on the phone. So the Microtiks just do have an incredibly wide operating capability, which allows you to operate out of the conventional Wi-Fi bands. Have I got no video now?
No.
Ew.
That's okay. We can hear
Is
you.
that better?
Yeah, we can hear you, but you need to get closer to the mic too. Your audio is very.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
a couple of observations while James comes back to us. More often than not, here is the end user gets a router or router, as you want to call it, from the ISP, and they're usually cheap as possible because they get given a router. The exception might be BT that has the how's that called, hub something that is decent, quite decent, but more often than not, they're not multiple input, multiple output, MIMO. That's the key for performances.
I was just going to come on to that. Another variable in the equation is the number of chains that you have in your Wi-Fi device. So a really cheap one will only have one chain, so one antenna working. A more expensive one will have two chains. So you have two antennas and you're taking two different signals and then combining them together to get a faster result. And more expensive still have typically 4 or even 6 or 8 chains in there, and you get a summing of the signal, and the thing just goes quicker as a result.
It's independent. The connections between the router and the router and the devices are independent from each other. So if there's a slower device because it's slower by itself because it's old, or it's too far away to run on a 5 gigahertz or a higher speed, just that device is connected and is working with the router at that speed. The others are unaffected on a non-MIMO or just 2 channels router. You always get the minimum common denominator speed for all your devices.
Indeed.
James, I have a request for you. If you could send Andy the link to the Microtech website, and I'm sure, you know, I would like to see that link, and I'm sure other people watching this would like to see the link to the equipment that you're talking about. So
yeah, okay. Well, we'll do it on here.
Now, I should say, Microtech stuff is not the friendliest.
No, it isn't.
Other brands are available, just to be.
Incredibly powerful and not recommended for consumer type people,
right?
Because it will bite your hand.
Well, any other like recommendations, I'm sure would be appreciated.
But if you know what you're doing with these things, they are incredibly powerful. And so, an example here's a battered old RB 2011 that I bought off eBay for 20 quid. And I'm actually running free switch on this. These things have the ability to run virtual machines on the router. So whereas 6 months ago I was running all this stuff on Raspberry Pis like everybody else, I decided that Raspberry Pis are just sort of also last year. I'm now a converted Microtech man. There we go, Microtech. Because they're cheaper and the hardware is just better. This particular one, I think it's got a quad-core processor and a big lump of RAM in there, and happily runs free switch without breaking into a sweat. Absolutely stunningly good.
Now, going back some time, the difference between, say, Microtech and pfSense was that those guys ported over to ARM much sooner, and so they were running on lesser hardware, where the pfSense guys stayed x86 based until relatively recently. They've only in the last year or so had a little ARM product, which drove the cost of their devices. The Microtech stuff was so much cheaper.
Yeah.
I got to run along, folks. I just want to say good evening to everybody. I will, just for the heck of it, probably try to get on the HOA in the middle of the cold weather outside on my way to the party. We'll never know. Maybe we can do one of those James visit the bridge, except I don't know what's on the way to where we're going. Anyway, see you all next week.
Yeah, can you get to your party without dropping the video?
No, but maybe at the party, if there's decent 4G, we can enjoy the party together.
Or even
well, we won't be on that
Wi-Fi.
long. It's about a 15, 20-minute walk. So see you there. Maybe I'll be in.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Oh, shoot. Oh, thank God that didn't happen. No, I clicked on the red button and forgot it says stop broadcast. Good night. Good night, Gracie. Continue broadcast. Cool.
Go on, press the button.
Well, no, because it gave me the choice to continue the broadcast. Oh, wait a minute.
You were still broadcasting, yeah.
No, when I hang up, wow. Oh.
Will it clear everything else down?
Well, it said to continue broadcast, so let me see.
Hang on.
You are currently broadcasting. Exit will stop. No, okay. I'm going to have to just...
leave it running?
Yeah, well, I count on Michael to kill it. Bye.
Then off he went. Still wearing his Tintin leather jacket.
Right. Who's taking the reins off?
Well, I will say one thing about, I agree with everything that you said about Wi-Fi. One of the things that arises from getting involved with the Civic Association hereabouts is I've been exposed to more average people. That is, yeah, the homeowners and all these sorts of folks. Where Andy and you guys all and myself, you know, in the wire chat, I was saying, Andy and I both prefer separates, which is to say, I have a router, I have access points, they are separate devices, they can be upgraded independently, and all this kind of thing. It's all well and good. I've seen lots of people in the neighborhood in various forms complaining about their internet access. Sometimes it's the service itself, and sometimes it's the Wi-Fi. But one of the things that's come to light as being quite valuable is Comcast's xFi. And that is, if you're not the sort to buy and own your own equipment, and if you can't, for various reasons of skill set and inclination, take ownership of the network and the service as a whole, xFi is quite attractive because what it is Comcast providing more sophisticated hardware and providing managed Wi-Fi. So it's not just their responsibility ends at the coaxial feed to the modem in your house, and you rent the modem from them or whatever. They'll take more complete ownership of your Wi-Fi environment. And they've actually bought and rebranded the Eero Wi-Fi mesh modules. And you can, just as you can rent the modem from them, you can rent these little pods that they call them, go around your house and fix your Wi-Fi dead spots. And they then will manage that remotely for you. So when you call them up when you have a problem, they can do something about it, as opposed to, we're going to send a monkey to fix your cable.
Okay, yeah. Or
so
tell you
that's a good value add. So
yeah, or tell you what to do, because we can see you have a device that is connected to that pod, but the signal is too weak. Get the device closer or the pod closer.
And a friend of mine who has a fairly large house and has a pretty good Comcast connection was having problems with Wi-Fi not spots. And basically, it was either I'm going to go over and help him do a bunch of stuff. He's going to spend a bunch of money, and then we're on the hook to support it ourselves. Or I just said, go to the Comcast store, tell him what's going on, and they basically gave him this box of 3 Eero pods that he put here, there, and everywhere in the house, and magically solved all of it. So it was good.
You need an ISP though that knows what is doing and takes ownership of your own environment, and that's something probably you're charged for it at the end of the day. So it depends on how much you want to pay for the service.
I guess, although xFi is a consumer service, so is a consumer residential, so they're it's priced appropriate to the marketplace. And the reality that I heard somebody from Comcast say was their support people were fielding all these questions about cruddy Wi-Fi from their endpoint, There's Comcast provided CPE. So they kind of had to own it anyway. They just decided we might as well embrace the whole thing and have a chance of success. And it's been working out.
Yeah. One thing I have objected in the past with the very famous adverts from BT, the most powerful router in wireless in the world. Yes, okay. The main router could be as powerful as you want and can transmit to a distance of 50, 100 meters, but that is a two-way communication. The other device needs to send a signal back to the router that while beamforming very high sensitivity and trying to get the signal, the device that is sitting 100 meters away from the router has to pump the signal up to 100% and is draining the battery so fast that it won't last at all. And it's probably not even strong enough to reach back to the router. So it really doesn't sit well with me. I don't understand why we need to get a signal from a single point so far away and so strong, probably breaking even all the EIRP recommended limits in radiation to get to somewhere where has no there's no point to get because the other device is stretched to the limit.
I think one of the things that's been interesting is to see, my brother-in-law bought the Ubiquiti mesh router. And this was, okay, he has AT&T's Uverse or something. I can't remember what it's branded these days, but so he bought the Ubiquiti mesh router solution, which was quite expensive. You're in for like $300, and I think faced with a capital spend of $300 versus even $10 more a month to get something from the provider, I think some folks would go with the ultimately more expensive getting it from the provider. But who knows? Why are you showing me?
Am I? I'm telling you.
Now you're showing us the MikroTik login screen or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to show you some bits and pieces. If I can find the right screen, and I've lost it. I've got too many screens open. I'll stop sharing until I found it. Oh, and I'm going to have to do something with that. That's nasty.
Feeding back, are you?
Thank you, James, for that.
Let's solve that one.
But we can discuss quality and quantity and performances of the Wi-Fi as much as we want between ourselves. The problem is to transfer what we know and what we experience and the experience and the knowledge we have to, as you said, Michael, average people, so they understand where the point is.
But it's very, very difficult to do because it's complicated. There are so many variables. And the best I think you can do with an untrained normal person is just bundle a whole load of intelligence into the router. So the router then, the Wi-Fi device, sees what the local operating conditions are and then adjusts its parameters accordingly. I think that's about as good as we can get, isn't it?
Yes, if you want to assume the responsibility for that. Whereas I would prefer to find, with some soul searching in this group, an analogy that we can create and to explain to people what is the connection they have on the phone, on the tablet, or on the wireless computer, on the laptop. What is the process? So to find a metaphor or an analogy that is easy to understand from average common users, so they understand that they can see where the problem might lie, instead of pointing the finger to the ISP or the broadband It's not your broadband. It's difficult because it's so complex. There are so many layers in that famous ISO-SI stack of things, where level 7, 8, and 9 and 10, the user.
Perhaps somebody needs to come up with some very, very clever graphic that shows the interaction between all these different layers. So you can actually look at this graphic, this picture, and see the bit that's causing you the problems. Because it, as you say, Corrado, it's layer upon layer upon layer. And some of these interactions are actually quite complicated.
Actually, I'm looking at just such a graphic. And you know what it is? It's the Ubiquiti Cloud Key interface for managing my APs.
Are you willing to share this? Can you show us?
Yes, sure. Let's see. I'm going to do it this way, though. Just a second. It'll take me a moment to... It's running on a different computer, but I can get it over there. We can do that. It's fine. Not a problem. Scan converter. Let's see what happens now. We have the technology.
Yeah, and what you're going to show us, I guess, is why the Ubiquiti devices sell for approximately 3 times the price of a MikroTik device.
There you go.
It's not that it has greater functionality, because I think probably the MikroTik out features anything else. It's just the sheer usability.
It's not just about usability, it's the amount of data you have on hand very quickly to pinpoint where a problem is, because it could be simple, but it could also be extremely detailed. There's deep packet inspection in every device, in every Ubiquiti device. So you know what people are using on the network. So you can prioritize some type of traffic over other. So it's a proper management interface that goes beyond the technicalities and uses the technology to allow you to tailor the performances to what users really want.
Yeah, well, that's quite.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. It's really wonderful. It's really splendid, and the ability to manage things from off-site is tremendous. If I were in Corrado's business of providing, SMB IT support to people, I would be gaga. I would be raving more than I am. However, this is way beyond any of my neighbors, right? This is why somebody needs to make a business out of delivering this kind of service, because ultimately there's knowledge overhead. And so the reality is somebody makes a decision. You're either going to own it, learn about it, run it, be responsible for it yourself, or you're going to let the service provider handle it for you, or somebody else handle it for you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm planning in a wireless ISP. I'm going to deploy between February and March next year. I'm going deep into the end user domain up to the pod, the access points, and the distribution, and possibly even the connection between that and the devices. Looking at everything, because I will be deploying Ubiquiti Kit throughout, from point-to-point connections, from the point, and then to multi-point the distribution to the end users, and the internal router and the access points distributed through the house. So I will have a single interface where I can control everything and the effectiveness and the performances of everything in a single interface. So that will be very helpful.
So does MikroTik do this stuff as well? Do they have the centralized management stuff, or are the devices insular?
Sorry, say again.
Does MikroTik provide this sort of centralized management interface, or are the devices insular?
Yes, it certainly does, but it's nowhere near as polished and user-friendly. If anything, it has considerably more functionality than the Ubiquiti stuff. But again, that's a problem because it is so feature-rich. It's enough to fry the brain of most people. And even I, watch out for that young lady, Randy. Randy almost walked into a young lady then.
He's just going into the party. He's not out of the party yet, so he's not even justified being partially drunk or something.
He's staggering down that road, isn't he? Stop staggering, Randy. Yeah, we're watching you. Hey,
it's not that he's staggering. It's that he doesn't have a gyro stabilized gimbal for his phone. That's a good Christmas gift idea.
It certainly is, isn't it? He's got a bouncy little step, isn't he? Bouncing along there. Anyway, well, we're distracted.
I'm pretty sure he's staggering too.
There was a project that I paid for that had that stabilizer thing, but they didn't come out in time for Camarillo World last year, so I canceled the order.
I've seen a couple now, and in fact, there's one I'm kind of interested in because it has an auto tracking function. So you tap on the phone screen at the person, the thing you want to track. Usually it's a face, and then if you walk around the room, it'll follow you, which is very much like how they're promoting the Facebook portal devices. And I'm sure all of you ran out and bought one of those.
No.
Sure. Yeah.
I tell you, if it wasn't tied to Facebook for $150, I'd have a couple just to try them. But something that's so tightly bound to Facebook, no thank you.
You know why that costs that little? Because you are the product.
Oh yeah, they're mining you for product. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, just whistling back to Wi-Fi very briefly. There are outfits like BT and Google with their Google Wi-Fi who are putting a huge amount of effort into trying to simplify Wi-Fi for end users. And you end up with something which gives you pretty good performance in most scenarios with minimal interaction from the user. So it sits there and kind of sorts it out. And as you said, one of the reasons Google are doing this is that they want to control and ultimately map all of your Wi-Fi for you, so that then Google know who and what is running on your Wi-Fi.
So a question for you, James, about Wi-Fi just in general. We've been in the AC realm for a while now, AC and MIMO, and the performance is very good. Do you think, and I've had Wi-Fi since the original B type, a long time ago. Do you think that, there's sort of a de facto competition between LTE and Wi-Fi, and do you think that the sort of broad rollout of LTE has slowed down the development of higher performance Wi-Fi, or is there what comes after AC?
Before we go into that, just a second, there is going to be a big step change in the protocol, in the security protocol that is used on Wi-Fi, on wireless devices, because WPA2 has been practically cracked. So we need to move to WPA3, and apparently the draft for the protocol is more efficient than WPA2, so the throughput will be better using the same frequencies and the same transmission protocols. So the layer underneath will be the same, but the layer up, the encryption protocol, will be more efficient, so we will get better throughput. That's why I would not invest in anything that is not software programmed and is not capable and compatible with the upcoming WPA3 protocol at the moment. I would stand by for a second. Again, LTE, 5G, and that new WPA3 are probably prodromic to something that is going far from AC, something that is faster again from AC, still on 5 gigahertz, but on a different protocol on that layer of connectivity. Something must come up.
All right. Interesting. We're seeing now the evolution of LTE products that operate in the same 5 gigahertz unlicensed band as Wi-Fi. And what is also quite interesting is if you put both an LTE waveform and a Wi-Fi AC waveform together in a locked room, it's not the Wi-Fi that wins.
the LTE waveform is altogether a lot more robust and aggressive, and will always dominate the Wi-Fi, which is one of the reasons why the new multifier, the LTE in 5 gig unlicensed, is set up in such a way that when it comes up and experiences 5 gig Wi-Fi traffic, the LTE backs off, so it doesn't just dominate the entire band. It's designed so it shares everything 50-50. But even operating 50-50, the LTE will get much better throughput because it's a more modern, it's clever waveform.
But
so
that's really the question, isn't it? Though, has that rollout stymied Wi-Fi, or is Wi-Fi still moving ahead? You know, does Wi-Fi get better?
To date, it hasn't, and the reason for that is that in order to deploy, just missed that lady on a bike. In order to deploy LTE, really today you need to be a mobile network operator. Otherwise, how else do you get access to the spectrum to be able to do it? Plus, even if you have the spectrum, you still need a mobile network core backing up the LTE cell in order to make it work. And most people are just totally incapable of that. However, spectrum is now opening up, so it will be possible for individuals to deploy their own LTE cells. All they need is somebody to come along with a back-end service to plug into it and make it all work. And I can't think who could do that. Can I? But anyway, so that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of LTE is the way that authentication and access is run. With Wi-Fi, there still isn't, even though they've had a couple of attempts at doing it, there just isn't one single centralized authentication mechanism for getting users onto a network, so identifying themselves and attaching to the network. And still we're in the realms of, you go into a hotel or restaurant and you ask for the Wi-Fi password, and you have to then manually put it into your device. I mean, that's so last century.
Well, we have WPS.
Speaking of LTE, you still have me here?
Yeah, we're still seeing you. It's holding up brilliantly.
There are a number of one-button click options that you have, and there's WPS and something else that is a very short number code that you need just to enter in your phone, rather than a very long password. Yeah, but again,
they're still not. Yeah, and you compare that with the no button or 0 click option with LTE. So you just come into range of the cell and it just attaches.
Yeah, but you need a SIM. You need a module that authenticates yourself, and it's automatic, but it's not working if you don't have an identifier module, a subscriber identifier module. It's a different type of authentication. It's done automatically for you by devices, but the authentication is still there. If you could create a protocol that uses a token that you have on your device, there are USB keys you can plug in on devices that authenticate yourself on the Wi-Fi. Yeah. I agree. But
expensive, and the fact that you can go out now, you can buy I don't know, a $30-40 LTE compatible device and put effectively a free SIM into that get it working. Demonstrates how powerful the thing is. I mean,
how many do you want?
I think I've got more.
just one of the boxes. One of the boxes I have. But
yeah,
that is easy. That's a subscriber identifier module, and it identifies you in the network, and works like 4G routers that we are deploying in rural areas to get internet connectivity. We send the router with the 4G SIM in. It's connected, powered on, even powered by PoE to a switch, and the client is connected, and that's done.
Okay, things are going to get even more interesting with 5G, because with 5G, the cell size gets smaller. And the big MNOs, mobile network operators, don't stand a chance of covering the ground. They just will not be able to do it. So when 5G eventually hits the streets, it will be largely reliant on third-party individuals to put out private cells and federate those to provide the 5G coverage, because the MNOs just won't be able to do it themselves.
And that's an interesting point where probably our friend Jay can work, because to federate those cells, maybe we can use the blockchain.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And the pending issue to solve is identity, workable identity. And I think, you know, there's a lot of interest in the blockchain community around solving the identity issues. But if you can solve that, get a workable identity structure, and you know, hang mesh and peer-to-peer devices and connectivity, then all of a sudden it's a new ball game for sure.
Yeah. So a new term that's beginning to float around now is the term reverse MVNO. A reverse MVNO is where somebody puts out radio access network and then the MNO customers roam onto it. So it's like an MVNO, but in reverse, in that with an MVNO, you had third parties roam onto an MNO radio access network. But with a reverse MVNO, you've got MNO customers that roam onto a third-party network.
So, James, I'm going to use that as a segue. I have to reverse my participation in the conversation today and say goodbye and have a good weekend. So I've gotten a lot out of the conversation today. Thank you so much, and look forward to next week.
Jay, thank you for being with us, as always.
Bye-bye.
We're close to the hour now, so.
And we looks like we've lost Randy. Hopefully it's just his batteries run out and that it's not.
No, he's probably just dropped the signal a bit, and he's still online.
Oh no, there he is.
He is.
He's still going.
Yeah, probably the bandwidth is not enough for the video.
Or he
but
just
yeah,
knows where he's going.
Right. Again, we didn't come up with a metaphor for the different layers of the Wi-Fi, the broadband, seeing as the end user. I thought about that like a layer cake, but again, the layers are all the same. A cheesecake with a base and the cheese on top. Something that is. So,
how do you explain signal to noise ratios to a consumer? The fact that if everybody reduces their power levels, it can actually work better.
Yeah,
it's counterintuitive. You expect that if you wind the power up, it's going to work better, but it doesn't.
No, exactly. That was what we were discussing with Michael before. When you have too many access points that fight each other, and you're better to have just a limited number of access points, or you have to reduce the power on the access points so they don't overlap, they don't practically interfere with each other. Yeah. Again, it's so difficult.
The choice of
I think the difficulty too is, you know, in reality, if you're trying to explain that to an end user, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's not the right person to explain it to. They chances are, what's the term? It's not MIMO, it's TLDR. Oftentimes they just don't want to know. They just want it fixed.
Yeah, you get eye glaze immediately.
I get this from my wife all the time. She's an excellent arbiter of such circumstances. She looks at me like, you just send all this information my way. I'm not going to retain any of it. Why did you bother?
Yeah.
There. Bright Michael. Okay, now fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all experience that, don't we? When somebody asks you a question and then I sigh and think, do you really, really, really want the answer to that? Because I know you're not going to listen to it. And within 3 seconds of me starting the explanation, you're going to go, and ask a totally different, unrelated question because you've lost it.
Yeah. Around our family, we use the term FM technology. It's just FM technology.
FM?
Fairy dust, pixie dust.
Very magic, yeah.
Or
How does it work?
People say that the magic smoke inside the electronic components. All electronic components work on magic smoke. When the magic smoke comes out of the electronic components, they no longer work. Yeah, that's the point. But it has come to a point that we in the technological community must become user friendly. Because technology is so pervasive, it's everywhere, that we need to be able to get down our level of communication to where the normal users are. Otherwise, we will face a backlash, in my opinion, because technology is so much ingrained in people's lives that we risk that if we don't communicate clearly and properly, people will feel caged in technology they don't understand. So we might need to get something to help us and help them.
Yeah, I believe that somebody is going to have to operate the matrix, and I believe that that's where there's a career path for us in the people who keep build and operate the matrix, even if other people merely occupy it.
Okay, I like that.
I mean, seriously, right? I've spent the preponderance of my career interfacing a group of people who don't know about something but have a need to a group of people who know about something and have a solution but can't communicate that to this other group. And that's, marketing and sales and to a certain degree support. So there's a boundary there, and I'm an interface device.
Okay. Are you getting this? This
Yes.
presentation?
Mnet.
Well, yeah, talking about, well, this is a presentation that was given by a guy called Jan Trachelski. He's a German radio amateur, a civil servant. And this is Wi-Fi gone mad in Germany. Wi-Fi and ham radio come together. This is a map of all the stations that they're running. And what these guys are doing is that they're doing extreme long range Wi-Fi. Let's move forward a bit.
That's been done to the stratosphere or the moon or something. Well,
no, this is all terrestrial, and mainly in the 6 centimeter band. So 5.650 gigs to 5.850, which is in an amateur band. But things like the MikroTik, so there's the network they're running. And I don't know whether you know. Oh, so this is a standard deployment, the sort of stuff they're doing. And note, this is all MikroTik stuff. And they're using MikroTik because the MikroTik stuff operates over a much wider bandwidth than the standard consumer Wi-Fi, which normally is stopped down to operate solely on the main consumer channels, whereas this stuff is wide open and can operate over a much wider spectrum. So
there are two frequency ranges. Let's be clear: the commercial consumer 5 gigahertz that is used in the Wi-Fi, and there's at least in the UK there is a fixed wireless access bandwidth that sits in the 5.8 gigahertz range, and that is a light license type of domain.
In fact, there's much more than that, because outside of those two bands, there are other bands, including the amateur band. And guess what? The MikroTiks do the whole shooting match. And then you've got other bits of spectrum which include things. So this is another example of the sort of thing they're doing. 31 dBm, by the way, is it's 31 dB above a milliwatt. So 30 dBm is 1 watt. So that's 1 dB above 1 watt. So effectively, we're talking about a power output of 1 watt there. Oh, here's another interesting thing. The radio amateurs have got Class A IP address. I'm just trying to find it. So it's 44.x.x.x, all ham radio. And I went on there and said, you know what? I want to have a go at this. I want to run a bit of BGP4. And there was a intake of breath, and the guy at the other end said, well, I'm going to have to refer that to California, to the controller. He came back and he issued me with a /16, a massive block of IP addresses. But
in this period where IPv4 addresses are hen's teeth, they're practically exhausted, that's a very good loot.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it? But it's only because they've got a complete Class A, and they're very aware of the fact that if they don't use them, they're likely to lose them. So if somebody like me comes on and says, I want to run BGP4, then you get /16. Anyway, this is an example of the sort of link that they're running. Look at the range. It is effectively Wi-Fi, but over 38.6 kilometers. 38.6 kilometer link.
Yeah, the problem is it has to be in line of sight.
Well,
so they have to either bounce against something else or very high towers.
We're talking about the first and third Fresnel zones are uninterrupted, which is not quite line of sight, but yeah, I know what you mean. It is roughly line of sight. Optical line of sight, but radio line of sight is not the same as optical line of sight, because radio waves do bend.
At those frequencies, they tend to follow the curvature of the Earth, but you can also use different frequencies that literally bounce off the stratosphere if you want to cover longer distances, as we know, short waves and those things.
Yeah. This is interesting. The radio amateurs have found a way of identifying their call signs, because one of the requirements of the amateur radio license is that you identify the station. So with this, they're using an ESSID, which says Hamnet, which says, okay, this is a Hamnet link, and it's a Hamnet link between DB0 ABC and DB0 XYZ, which is quite clever, really. Anyway,
but that's only point-to-point links. For point-to-point links, because point-to-multipoint cannot identify.
That is correct. Yeah. And look, here we are. This is showing the districts and the IP allocations. Oh, and every couple of days, I get a new script from AMPANET, which is the regulator for this, which you can feed directly into your MikroTik, which does all the routing for you, sets it all up. So there's quite a lot to this. And you think, this is amateur radio? Yes, it's amateur radio. This is amateur radio done with, so amateur radio does the internet.
Yeah.
But it's quite good. And then you see they're hanging things like webcams and things like repeaters, voice repeaters on lower frequencies, hanging off this IP backbone. So you end up with all these conventional voice repeaters all being networked together, and digital things. And it goes on, the documentation goes on. It's typical German engineering. Look at this. So this is showing how it all works. So DMR is digital mobile radio, 70 SEMS repeater, 2 meter repeater, 23 SEMS repeater, and some form of server on there, which is mixing. All Starlink is a repeater trunking thing. And it goes on. You think, what motivates these guys? Why are they doing this? Total lunatics.
Well, they're ham radio. Yeah.
Well, doing it because they can.
Yeah, but you know, I don't know if you ever had any connection with ham radio. I did in the past. You do it just because you can. because it's technologically challenging and interesting.
Yeah, well, I got my amateur radio license when I was a first year undergraduate at the University of London, because we all had to, in order to do the coursework, you had to be a radio amateur. So in our first term, we all marched off to the Royal Horticultural Hall in London. We all sat our amateur radio exam under the great Professor John Claricotts. And that started me. I later became the General Secretary of the Royal Signals Amateur Radio Society and ended up being awarded with an honorary life membership of said society. And I have the rather dubious distinction of being the first honorary life member of that society who has not served in World War II. So there we are. I was the boy. But anyway,
the young one.
I was the youngster. But they're all kind of dying off now, which is all died off.
Well, because using radio waves is hugely complicated, because we know that bandwidths and bands are not the same throughout the planet. They're used in different ways in different places. So the common standard throughout the planet is very, very small. So there's too much congestion. There was too much congestion as far as I remember when I was using that. So all kind of borderline legal things were done, including high power end stages and directional aerials and so on. I remember a neighbor had a huge quad, aerial motorized quad on the top of his house, and it was.
I guess you're talking about 26, 27 megahertz.
Probably yes, the 27. Yeah. The Citizens Band CB.
Yeah.
Bandwidth, but it was literally huge. About off the top of my head, could have been a cube of 7 meter side. Like it could rotate to get the best signal. It was massive and so subject to winds that it was tied up to the ground around the house rather than on the house, because it could lift the roof.
Yeah, but you look back on those days and you think how antiquated that was, because with all that effort to do one narrow band voice signal, and these days we can do narrow band voice amateur radio with much higher quality. You just do it on your mobile phone. Yeah. So the amateurs have got a marvelous system called Echolink. I don't know where you come across that. And basically you put a voice over IP push to talk client onto your phone. And then if you're a licensed radio amateur, you can then access the Echolink network, and you can get into VHF and UHF voice repeaters all over the world. And my favorite is I talked to a guy called Fred, I think, or Frank, in Bridgetown, Barbados. And he's a taxi driver, and he has a 77s radio in his taxi. And you can talk to him, and he has the most brilliant, wonderfully warm Barbadian accent. And he'll tell you about the traffic jams in Bridgetown, Barbados.
I can imagine.
Yeah, traffic is very high.
Terrible. Okay.
Yeah. Hours of fun playing with that.
We should probably wind this down from a recording point of view, don't you think?
Yeah, well, because I'm yarming on and I need to shut up, don't I? And go away.
No, it's fine. It's been interesting. But we were in Wire the other day lamenting the fact that podcasts that run to 2, 3, and 5 hours are, well, regrettable.
Yeah.
So...
Well,
if you can't keep your focus for half an hour on an hour tops on a topic, and you have to ramble on for 3, 5 hours, probably a podcast is not your medium.
Well, I haven't been allowed to be on for a while because I've just been too busy. So I've got a lot of latent stored up rubbish in my head.
And with that, I'll close off the recording and we can carry on the others.
Okay.
Sure.
Plonk. Is it going to go? Still says live.
Yeah.
Takes a
Well,
while to die, doesn't it? And die. God, it's taking forever.
probably because
I
Randy
think
started.
The abandon the end it button. So hang on, we're not live. Oh, you know
No,
what?
we are live because it's Randy that started. You're still live.
Yes,
So,
yes, and I
how
need
do
to
we
log
turn
in.
down?
I need to log in as that. I'll be back and then I'll rejoin and we'll get that sorted. But I'll have to bail for a moment and then come back. Yeah, hang on.
Yeah, roger that.
that's what I thought he was doing.
Yeah. However, I may need to tap in your expertise, guys, because I have a client that are sitting in a rural building with very thick walls. And they have good coverage outside for 4G, but the farmhouse is rubbish. They have an office. They want a 4G repeater with an aerial outside and a small repeater inside, a microcell practically. Or I don't know if it's better a passive or an active. What do you think?
Well, because we are who we are, we would always say go active and just put a multi-operator neutral host device inside. And then that will then serve any network, anybody who comes into the building. I take it that they've got reasonably good IP backhaul.
Yes, they have. Through
supplied by this interesting Scottish broadband team called SBT.
Not exactly. There's another company that does it. Is Highland Perthshire Community Partnership, but we are working in partnership with them. HPCP.
Okay, what does SBT it stand for? It is Scottish
Broadband Telecom.
Telecom. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, we're using the same technology, and I'm consulting for them. They're helping me somewhere else. We are doing business together practically. But yes, the IP backhaul is connected there. But they have a very good a mast, a Vodafone mast, quite close, and the signal outside is good. The problem is with inside. They beside having that farmhouse as an old building. They also lined up the outside with panels for heat. Insulation.
This is metal foil.
Yeah, metal foil thing. So,
yeah.
And because they have large windows that look into the courtyard, but because it's exposed to south, they put a film in the windows. And that is a reflective, as Michael did, a reflective.
Ooh. What's going on? Everything's stopped. Is that my end?
Corrado's been having fun losing connectivity and power cuts and broken machines and other such things.
Well, perhaps he needs to get a good broadband supplier.
I don't think it's his broadband. I think it's his machine.
All right. All of a sudden he froze. Anyway, how are you, Andy? Are you?
We're still live.
Yeah, but you're not doing video. Is there a reason for that?
It might have to do something to do with slight embarrassment with teeth.
Oh dear, you haven't lost another one, have you?
No. But I've lost plenty, thank you. But as Randy put it, it's because I'm wanted in several countries, so I'm not doing video.
Oh,
he got kicked out, says Corrado. Ah,
kicked out. But he's not kicked out because he's still there. Well, his presence is still there, albeit frozen. What's that song from Frozen? Let it go, let it go. Oh, here's another Miguel.
Actually, what happened is Randy changed the password on the Google login, and I went through the password recovery process, and it does not want to log me in. So I think all we can do is end this, and that would be that.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. We can come back, unfortunately, but well, hang on. Let me try one other thing. Sync to that. No. Hang on, just one sec. I'm going to try one other trick.
You're even sounding like Randy. Hold on, hang on, hang on, hang on. Oh, we're hanging. How does it go? It goes like this, isn't it? I can't hold on much longer. I'm going. Ah, ah!
Sorry, how old are you, did you say? Was it 10 or 11?
Yeah, anyway. We need to turn this live thing off so I can tell you what I saw today.
Yes, I know.
The toys I saw. Multi-fuel we're talking about. And able to carry up to 10 kilos, yet staying underneath the weight limit for the
unmanned vehicles, flying vehicles.
Yeah,
yes.
you know, if you go over a certain mass, you have to do all kinds of tests and certificates and things like that. So if you can keep everything under a certain mass, then your training bill is considerably less. Is my thought.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's just the way it is. Randy's changed the password, and it won't let me. The password that I have will not work, and it sends me a confirmation code to change the password up again, but it won't let me log in. So very possibly because Randy's logged in already. So and I don't want to.
Have you got rights? You can't kick Randy.
I cannot because I'm not logged in. You know, I'm not logged in with the master sort of admin login for this profile, which was what launched it. So right. I don't have. That's because I don't have the, and it won't let me do that. So all we can do is end it and then perhaps come back to it.
Okay. Well, to anybody who's still watching, you're going to be watching Randy's nice logo there. And nothing else until either he returns or the live recording reaches 4 hours.
Actually, I believe with just one person, it'll stop at a certain amount of time.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out. We'll test that, shall we?
Well, I suppose we better go and stop then, haven't we?
Yeah, indeed. All right, gentlemen, have yourselves a good weekend.
Okay. Yeah. Cheers, Michael.
Stopping now.
Bye.
Bye.
You don't know what's what's happening.